The first thing they teach you in business school is to identify market opportunities. The second is to never, ever tell your extended family what you're actually working on. I learned the second lesson the hard way. 3 years ago, I left my prestigious position at Morgan Stanley to pursue what my father-in-law Gerald called a ridiculous pipe dream. My app, Secure Health, used artificial intelligence to streamline medical record systems while maintaining rigorous privacy standards. Not exactly dinner conversation material, especially in a family that measured success by corner offices and country club memberships. Data privacy in healthcare, who cares about that? Gerald had dismissed when I first explained my concept. Hospitals have been keeping records for centuries without your fancy algorithms. What Gerald didn't understand, what most people didn't understand, was that healthcare cybersecurity was about to become a multi-billion-dollar industry. I had spent 2 years at Morgan Stanley analyzing healthcare technology investments. I saw the patterns, recognized the gaping hole in the market, and knew that whoever filled it first would redefine an industry. My wife, Elaine, understood. With her background in hospital administration, she recognized the potential immediately. This could revolutionize patient data management, she'd said, eyes bright with excitement. The current systems are nightmares, expensive, clunky, vulnerable to breaches. Her support gave me the courage to make the leap. We agreed to give it 3 years, living off our savings and her income as a hospital administrator. If Secure Health hadn't gained traction by then, I'd return to corporate finance with my tail between my legs, just as her family predicted. Those 3 years were the hardest and most rewarding of my life. I assembled a small team of brilliant engineers, secured seed funding from investors who actually understood healthcare technology, and worked 18-hour days developing a platform that made patient data simultaneously more secure and more accessible to authorized users. Throughout it all, I endured the not-so-subtle digs from Elaine's family. Her father, Gerald, a retired banking executive. Her sister, Catherine, a corporate attorney, and her brother-in-law, Mark, who never tired of mentioning his executive position at a Fortune 500 company. Only Elaine's mother occasionally asked genuine questions about my work, though I suspect more out of politeness than interest. "Still playing with your computer program?" became Gerald's standard greeting at family gatherings. "How's the unemployment treating you?" Mark would smirk, conveniently ignoring that I was working harder than I ever had at Morgan Stanley. Even Catherine, who should have understood the concept of building something from the ground up, regularly suggested job openings that would provide stability and actual benefits. For 3 years, I smiled through their condescension. For 3 years, I kept the details of Secure Health's growing success to myself. The major hospital system pilot program, the glowing write-up in Healthcare Technology Review, the second round of venture funding that valued the company at $40 million. Elaine and I agreed that success would speak for itself when and if it came. Then came last Thanksgiving. The day had begun triumphantly. After months of negotiations, Meditech Global, one of the largest healthcare technology companies in the world, had made a formal acquisition offer. $300 million for Secure Health. My team would remain intact, continuing our work with expanded resources. I would serve as division president for at least 5 years. The paperwork would be finalized the following Monday. Elaine and I celebrated quietly that morning before heading to her parents' house for the traditional family Thanksgiving. We decided to share the news after dinner, wanting one last family gathering before everything changed. The meal progressed predictably. Gerald dominated the conversation with stories about his golf game and complaints about the economy. Catherine detailed her recent courtroom victory. Mark boasted about his company's stock performance, pointedly asking if I considered investing whatever savings you haven't burned through yet. When the conversation inevitably turned to my project, I gave my standard vague update. Things are moving forward. We're in discussions with some interested parties. Discussions? Gerald scoffed, carving another slice of turkey. 3 years of discussions. Meanwhile, Catherine just made partner. "We're all concerned, Michael," Catherine added with practiced sympathy. This startup phase should have produced results by now if it was viable. "Why don't we get a real job?" My father-in-law sneered, jabbing his fork in my direction. 3 years of your silly little app, and what do you have to show for it? My wife squeezed my hand under the table as her sister chimed in. "Some people just can't handle corporate responsibility." Not everyone is cut out for the real business world. I felt Elaine tense beside me, ready to defend me as she had countless times before. But before she could speak, my phone rang. Meditech's CEO, calling to discuss some last-minute details before Monday's signing. "Excuse me," I said, standing from the table. "I need to take this." "Of course you do," Gerald muttered as I stepped into the study. Probably another rejection. The call was brief but significant. Meditech was actually increasing their offer to $320 million after their technical team completed a final review of our proprietary algorithms. I ended the call feeling simultaneously vindicated and exhausted by the charade we'd been maintaining. When I returned to the dining room, the conversation had moved on to Catherine's children's private school accomplishments. I caught Elaine's questioning glance and made a split-second decision. I nodded slightly, and her face broke into a radiant smile. "Everyone," she said, interrupting Catherine's story about her son's debate team victory. "Michael and I have an announcement." The table fell silent, all eyes turning toward us. Gerald's expression suggested he was bracing for news of our financial ruin. Instead, I placed the acquisition contract, which I brought to show Elaine's mother privately, on the table. "You're right," I said calmly. "The startup phase should produce results by now if it's viable. I just sold my failure for $300 million. Actually, make that $320 million as of 5 minutes ago." The silence that followed was so complete we could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Catherine was the first to recover. $300 million? She stammered, reaching for the contract. $320 million, I corrected gently, plus performance incentives. Dinner's on me next year. Gerald's face progressed through an impressive range of emotions: disbelief, shock, confusion, and finally something approaching respect. "You're serious," he managed, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Meditech Global." Mark read from the contract, recognition dawning. That's one of the biggest healthcare tech companies in the world. "Second largest," I confirmed. "They're making it public next week after the paperwork is finalized." Elaine's mother was the first to offer congratulations, rising to embrace both of us. "I knew you were working on something important," she said, genuine pleasure in her voice. As the news sank in, questions erupted around the table. What exactly did Secure Health do? Created a revolutionary secure platform for medical records that reduced administrative costs by 40% while enhancing privacy protection. How many employees did I have? 28 brilliant people who were now all millionaires thanks to our equity structure. Will we be moving? No, Meditech was establishing a new division headquarters in our city. Gerald, uncharacteristically quiet, finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Why didn't you tell us any of this was happening?" Elaine and I exchanged glances. "Would you have understood?" she asked her father gently. "Or would you have called it a pipe dream until the check actually cleared?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. Later, as we were preparing to leave, Gerald approached me in the hallway. For the first time in our relationship, he seemed uncertain. "I misjudged you," he admitted, extending his hand. "And your business?" "It's healthcare data security, Gerald," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. Not exactly thrilling dinner conversation. "I should have asked more questions," he acknowledged, "instead of making assumptions." "We all make assumptions," I said. "I assumed you'd never understand what I was trying to build." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that. But I'd like to understand now, if you're willing to explain it to me sometime." It wasn't quite an apology, but coming from Gerald, it was seismic. The ride home was quiet, Elaine's head resting on my shoulder as we processed the evening. "Are you glad we told them?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. Yes and no. Part of me wanted to keep succeeding in silence. But there's something powerful about finally being seen, really seen, by people who dismissed you. "They'll never underestimate you again," she noted. "It's not about me," I replied. "It's about challenging their definition of success. Maybe next time they meet someone pursuing an unconventional path, they'll ask questions instead of making judgments." The Monday signing was surreal. Executives in expensive suits, lawyers with elaborate contracts, congratulatory handshakes, and a wire transfer that transformed our theoretical value into life-changing reality. But even more surreal was the group text I received from Gerald that afternoon. Sent to the entire family, celebrating Michael's extraordinary achievement. Dinner at the Capitol Grill, 7 p.m. His vision and persistence have taught this old banker something about recognizing opportunity in unexpected places. Attached was an article from the Wall Street Journal's breaking news section. Meditech acquires Secure Health for $320 million, revolutionizing medical records security. The dinner that evening was different from any family gathering we ever had. For the first time, I was peppered with genuine questions about my work, my team, my vision for healthcare security. Catherine admitted she'd never really understood what I was building. Mark asked thoughtful questions about equity structuring for startups. And Gerald, remarkably, mostly listened. As dessert was served, Gerald raised his glass. To Michael, he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar note of humility, who saw an opportunity none of us recognized and had the courage to pursue it. I've spent 40 years in banking thinking I understood business. You show me there's always more to learn. The validation was sweet, of course. But as I looked around the table, I realized the most valuable outcome wasn't the money or even the professional recognition. It was the fundamental shift in how this family, our family, understood success. 3 months later, Catherine's daughter announced she was deferring law school to work for a climate tech startup. Rather than objecting, Catherine called me to ask about mentorship opportunities and equity compensation structures. Gerald, most surprisingly of all, began investing in early-stage healthcare technology companies, leveraging his banking experience to help founders navigate growth challenges. These young entrepreneurs remind me of you, he told me over golf one weekend. They see problems the rest of us have accepted as normal. Success, I've learned, isn't measured by acquisition prices or impressing your in-laws. Real success is creating something valuable that didn't exist before, whether it's a revolutionary software platform or a new perspective that changes how a family defines achievement. As for me, I still work 18-hour days sometimes, building the next generation of healthcare security tools. The difference is that now, when I mention a new project at family gatherings, people actually listen. The money changed our financial reality overnight, but it was the 3 years of perseverance, of building something important while being dismissed, that changed how I define my own success. And that, unlike market valuation, is something that can never be acquired or diminished by anyone else's opinion. The emergency alarm blared through Metropolitan General Hospital at 3:47 a.m., its harsh tone cutting through the usual quiet of pre-dawn rounds. I was checking on Mrs. Rodriguez in room 412 when it started. That awful sound that every healthcare worker dreads. Code black. Total system failure. I'm Sarah Chen, on BSN, and after 15 years at MetroGen, I thought I'd seen everything. But watching our hospital's entire electronic infrastructure crash in real time, that was new. Sarah, Dr. Thompson burst into the unit, his usual arrogance replaced by panic. Nothing's working. The EMR is down. Pharmacy systems are offline. Even the DAN elevator controls are glitching. What's happening? I was already moving, my mind racing through protocols and backup procedures. Get every nurse you can find. We need to switch to paper charting immediately. I'll coordinate with pharmacy for critical medications. He blinked, unused to taking orders from a nurse. But the administration will be useless until they get here. Right now, we need to focus on patient safety. I'd spent years building relationships throughout the hospital, from the janitors to the pharmacy techs, from the cafeteria workers to the security guards. While the doctors and administrators played politics in their meetings, I learned how the hospital really worked. For the next 2 hours, I coordinated a hospital-wide response. Nurses pulled out emergency paper charts we kept just in case. Pharmacy staff manually verified and delivered medications. Security teams monitored doors and access points that usually relied on electronic locks. By sunrise, we had stabilized the immediate crisis. Patients were safe, medications were flowing, and basic operations continued. That's when the suits started arriving. Metropolitan General wasn't just any hospital. It was the flagship facility of the prestigious Chen Medical Group, no relation to me, unfortunately. Founded by the legendary Dr. James Chen 50 years ago, it had grown into a healthcare empire spanning 3 states. The current CEO, Marcus Chen Jr., swept into the emergency command center at 7 a.m. sharp, flanked by board members and administrators. I was reviewing handwritten patient reports when they arrived. How did this happen? Marcus demanded, his tailored suit out of place among the exhausted healthcare workers. Where's Dr. Harrison? Dr. Thompson, Both dealing with critical patients, I replied, not looking up from my charts. The backup generators are stable, but all clinical systems remain down. We've implemented emergency protocols. And who are you to make such decisions? Board Chairman Wilson interrupted, peering at my ID badge. A nurse? I met his gaze steadily. Senior charge nurse, emergency response coordinator, and the person who's kept this hospital running for the past 3 hours. Yes, well, he dismissed with a wave. Thank you for your basic assistance, but this is a matter for hospital leadership now. Please return to your regular duties. Regular duties. As if managing a crisis affecting hundreds of patients was somehow beneath their notice because I didn't have MD or MBA after my name. The A-team reports it's a ransomware attack, the chief technology officer announced. They've encrypted all our systems. They're demanding $10 million in cryptocurrency within 48 hours, or they'll delete everything. The room erupted in chaos. Board members shouted about insurance policies and legal liability. Administrators argued about emergency procedures and press responses. I stood quietly, thinking about the project I've been developing in my spare time. A revolutionary backup system designed specifically for healthcare emergencies. I tried presenting it to administration 3 times over the past year. Each time, I was politely but firmly dismissed. This is what happens when we rely too heavily on technology, Dr. Thompson declared, finally joining the meeting. We need to focus on medical solutions, not computer problems. Actually, I started. I have a potential. Please. Chairman Wilson cut me off with a condescending smile. This is hardly the time for nursing suggestions. We need real solutions from qualified experts. I looked around the room at these qualified experts, administrators who'd never worked a night shift, doctors who couldn't find the backup generators, board members who didn't know the first thing about our actual emergency protocols. Of course, I said quietly, gathering my papers. I'll leave you to it. As I walked out, I heard Marcus Chin Jr. say, "Get me every technology consultant in the city. Money is no object." They had no idea that the solution they needed was walking out the door. No idea that I'd spent the past 3 years developing and testing a comprehensive healthcare backup system. One that could not only restore our current systems, but protect against future attacks. No idea that while they were focused on their millions and their reputations, I've been focused on what really mattered: patient safety. I went back to my unit, where the real work continued. Nurses exchanged knowing looks as updates filtered down from the command center. More consultants arrived, each with their own expensive proposals. Hours ticked by with no progress. By evening, the situation was deteriorating. Without access to medical records, medication histories, or imaging systems, patient care was becoming dangerous. The emergency department had to divert critical cases to other hospitals. The press was camping outside, sensing a story about one of the country's most prestigious hospitals brought to its knees. My phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Sarah Zhang, my old roommate from nursing school who now worked at the CDC. Heard about MetroGen, how bad? I gave her a quick update, then added, "Remember that backup system I told you about? The one those idiots rejected? Yeah, would it help? It would solve everything. But they won't listen to just a nurse." Her response came quickly. Then maybe it's time they learned what nurses can really do. She was right. I'd spent my career being underestimated, watching administrators make decisions without understanding the frontline reality of healthcare. Maybe this crisis was an opportunity. I went to my locker and pulled out a worn leather notebook, Dad's last gift before he died. He'd been a maintenance worker at MetroGen for 30 years, teaching me everything about the hospital's infrastructure that you couldn't learn in nursing school. Sometimes, he'd said, you have to let people fail before they'll accept help. Opening the notebook, I reviewed my system's architecture one more time. 3 years of work, countless late nights, every detail meticulously planned. A solution that could save not just MetroGen, but potentially hospitals across the country. They had 36 hours until the ransom deadline. The question was, how long would their arrogance last before they realized they needed help from just a nurse? I sent a message to my small team of trusted colleagues, other nurses, its staff, and technicians who'd helped me develop and test the system in secret. Be ready. When they finally ask for help, we'll have to move fast. Then I settled in for a long night of patient care. knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about being right. By dawn, Metropolitan General was in chaos. The expensive consultants had failed. Each attempted fix only made things worse, and the ransomware's deadline loomed closer with every passing hour. I watched from my unit as another team of suited experts rushed past, their polished shoes clicking against floors they'd never walked during a night shift. Through the window, I could see news vans gathering like vultures. Sarah, Jenny, one of our best ICU nurses, appeared at my side. They're calling an emergency board meeting. All department heads. Let me guess. Nurses aren't invited. She smiled grimly. Actually, they are. They're desperate enough to try anything now. The main conference room was packed when I arrived. Board members sat around the massive oak table, while department heads lined the walls. The tension was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. Marcus Chen Jr. looked like he hadn't slept. Our latest consultants estimate 5 days minimum to rebuild the systems, he announced. The ransom deadline is in 18 hours. What about our backup servers? Someone asked. The CTO shook his head. Compromised. The attack was sophisticated. They got everything. We can't run a hospital this size on paper charts, Dr. Thompson declared. It's not 1950. I waited, watching them spiral into panic and blame. Chairman Wilson was red-faced, shouting about stock prices and reputational damage. Department heads argued about prioritizing their patients. Finally, I cleared my throat. I have a solution. The room fell silent, heads turning. Some looked confused. They'd probably never noticed me at these meetings before. Ms. Chen, Chairman Wilson sighed. Unless you have 10 million in cryptocurrency, I have something better. I interrupted, pulling out my laptop. A comprehensive backup system designed specifically for healthcare emergencies, one that can restore our operations and prevent future attacks. Marcus leaned forward. What are you talking about? I opened my presentation, the same one they'd dismissed 3 times before. For the past 3 years, I've been developing a secure, distributed system that maintains real-time copies of all critical healthcare data. It operates independently from main hospital networks, with multiple redundancies and security protocols. And you're just mentioning this now? Dr. Thompson demanded. Actually, Jenny spoke up from the back. She's tried to present it 3 times. You all said it wasn't worth considering because she's just a nurse. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. How do we know it works? The CTO asked, professional skepticism warring with desperate hope. Because we've been testing it in parallel for 6 months, I replied. Remember that efficiency study you approved without reading? My team has been running shadow systems, proving the concept works. Your team? I gestured to the back of the room, where Jenny and several others stood. Nurses, its staff, technicians. The invisible workforce that kept the hospital running while administrators attended galas. Show me, Marcus said. For the next hour, I walked them through the system's architecture. Every question they asked, I had an answer. Every scenario they proposed, I'd already considered. Years of frontline experience had taught me what healthcare workers really needed in a crisis. This is impressive, the CTO admitted, but implementation would take weeks. 6 hours, I corrected. The infrastructure is already in place. We just need authorization to activate it. Chairman Wilson sputtered. You installed unauthorized systems in our hospital? No, I smiled. I installed authorized systems through proper channels. You just never bothered to read the proposals you were signing. Too busy assuming nurses couldn't understand technology, I suppose. The room erupted in arguments. Board members demanded to know how they'd missed this. Department heads who dismissed my previous presentations suddenly became my biggest supporters. Marcus raised his hand for silence. How much? For what? To buy your system. Name your price. I thought about Dad, about all the nights he taught me about the hospital's infrastructure while cleaning floors the administrators never saw. About all the nurses who'd helped me test and refine the system while being told they were just support staff. I'm not selling, I said clearly, but I'll license it to the hospital under 2 conditions. They waited. First, the license fees go to establishing a frontline innovation fund, supporting ideas from nurses, technicians, and other staff who actually understand how hospitals work. Marcus nodded slowly. And second, I want a seat on the board, not as a token nurse, but as Chief Innovation Officer with real authority to implement changes. Absolutely not. Chairman Wilson began, but Marcus cut him off. Done. Marcus, you can't. We have 16 hours until we lose everything, Marcus snapped. Our choice is between pride and survival. I choose survival. The next 6 hours were intense. My team worked seamlessly, implementing protocols we'd rehearsed for months. While the consultants watched in amazement, nurses and technicians executed a hospital-wide system restoration. By midnight, Metropolitan General was back online. Patient records secured. Medical systems operational. The ransomware isolated and neutralized. The press called it a miracle. Prestigious hospital defeats cyber attack. The headlines read. They interviewed Marcus about the hospital's innovative leadership, while Chairman Wilson smiled stiffly beside him. Only those of us who'd worked that crisis knew the truth, that the solution had come from the people they'd underestimated all along. 1 week later, I sat in my first board meeting. No more standing against the wall. No more being dismissed or interrupted. We need to discuss implementing Ms. Chen's system across all our hospitals, Marcus began. Sarah, I corrected. And yes, we do. But first, we need to talk about changing the culture that made it necessary for nurses to develop solutions in secret. Looking around that massive oak table, I saw the shift in their expressions. Respect, finally, from people who'd never bothered to learn my name before the crisis. Chairman Wilson retired 2 months later, citing personal reasons. His replacement? Dr. Sarah Zhang, my old roommate who'd helped me develop the system's initial concept during late-night study sessions. The Frontline Innovation Fund has already approved 12 projects, from improved patient monitoring systems to streamlined medication protocols, all developed by the people who actually do the work. Yesterday, a new nursing graduate asked me how I managed to break through the hospital hierarchy. I didn't break through it, I told her. I proved it was broken to begin with. Dad's old notebook sits on my desk now, next to my board member nameplate. Inside, I've added my own notes, not just about hospital infrastructure, but about the power of being underestimated. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right and then using that victory to open doors for others. The emergency alarm still blares occasionally. That's the nature of healthcare. But now, when crisis hits, everyone knows that solutions can come from anywhere, even from just a nurse. After all, in healthcare as in life, the real experts aren't always the ones with the fanciest titles. Sometimes they're the ones who've been there all along, quietly keeping the system running while others claim the credit. And sometimes it takes a crisis to make everyone else finally see it. My name is Olivia Winters, and I've spent the last decade being invisible. Not literally, of course, but in the way that truly matters to my family, success, power, and most importantly, money. The irony? I'm worth more than all of them combined. They just don't know it yet. I stood in front of the mirror in my modest apartment, adjusting my simple black blazer. Nothing designer, nothing flashy. Exactly the image I carefully cultivated. My phone buzzed with another message from my mother. Darling, please come to the celebration dinner tonight. Your brother's promotion is such wonderful news for the family. Marcus, my older brother, had just been named CEO of Winters International, our family's technology company. The golden child had finally ascended to his throne. I typed back a polite acceptance, knowing exactly how the evening would play out. The restaurant was exactly what I expected, overpriced, pretentious, and dripping with old money. The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. My family was already seated at the prime table, champagne flowing freely. Olivia, my mother called out, her voice carrying that familiar note of carefully masked disappointment. We weren't sure you'd come. You're so busy with your investments. The way she said investments made it sound like I was running a lemonade stand. If only she knew that my small investment company, Shadow Valley Partners, controlled nearly 60% of Winters International through a complex web of shell corporations and silent partnerships. Marcus stood up, resplendent in his custom suit, his new Patek Philippe watch glinting under the chandelier lights. Little sister, finally decided to join the real business world. I could always use someone to handle the coffee runs at that office. Our father chuckled, raising his glass. Now, Marcus, I'm sure Olivia's doing fine with her little venture. Though he turned to me, his eyes sharp, "You could have had a real career at Winters. We offered you a position straight out of business school." I smiled, taking a sip of water. Yes, as Marcus's assistant. I preferred to make my own way. And what a way it is, Marcus smirked. Still working out of that tiny office downtown. Well, I'm about to sign the biggest deal in Winter's history, $50 million merger with Tech Solutions. But you wouldn't understand the complexities of such things. If he only knew that Tech Solutions was one of my holdings acquired specifically for this moment. Congratulations, Marcus. That sounds like quite the achievement. My mother beamed at him. Marcus has always had such a head for business. Remember when he was just 10 and started that little baseball card trading venture? You mean when he took my rare Mickey Mantle card and sold it without my permission? I asked quietly. Oh, darling, that was ages ago. You need to let these things go. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Look at him now, CEO at 35. While you're still, she trailed off, unable to even describe what I did. The evening continued in this vein, a steady stream of praise from Marcus interspersed with subtle digs at my life choices. I sat quietly, picking at my overcooked salmon, letting their words wash over me. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight I would let them have their moment. As dessert arrived, Marcus launched into another story about his brilliant business acumen. The Tech Solutions deal is just the beginning. Once we acquire them, Winters International will dominate the market. The board meeting tomorrow is just a formality. I checked my phone, hiding a smile at the email that had just arrived. My team had finished the final preparations. Tomorrow's board meeting would be anything but a formality. Speaking of the merger, my father interjected, I heard a rumor that some mystery investor has been buying up shares through various shell companies. Should we be concerned? Marcus laughed, adjusting his Italian silk tie. Please, Dad. I've got everything under control. This deal is bulletproof. By this time tomorrow, Tech Solutions will be ours, and Winters International will be unstoppable. I excused myself early, citing a morning meeting. As I stood to leave, Marcus called out, Hey sis, maybe once this deal goes through, I can throw some consulting work your way. Help you get a real business going. That's thoughtful of you, Marcus, I replied, gathering my non-designer purse. Actually, I do have a meeting tomorrow. Something about a major company acquisition. Oh, my mother perked up, finally showing interest in my work. What company? I smiled. You'll find out soon enough. That night, in my home office, which was decidedly larger and more impressive than the small downtown space my family knew about, I reviewed the documents one final time. Years of careful planning had led to this moment. My phone rang. It was David, my head of legal. Everything's set for tomorrow, Olivia. The share transfers have been confirmed, and all the paperwork is in order. Are you sure you want to do this? It's going to be quite a shock for them. I looked at the family photo on my desk, taken 15 years ago at my business school graduation. I was standing slightly apart from the others, Marcus front and center, already being groomed for leadership. That was the day they offered me the assistant position, the day I decided to forge my own path. Yes, I'm sure, I replied. It's time they learned that success doesn't always wear a designer label. I hung up and walked to my window, looking out over the city lights. Tomorrow Marcus would walk into that boardroom expecting to sign his triumphant merger deal. Instead, he'd find out that his little sister owned not only Tech Solutions, but the majority of Winters International itself. Tomorrow, being invisible would finally pay off. The next morning, I stood in my private elevator ascending to the top floor of Shadow Valley Partners' real headquarters. The building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, was actually twice as tall as Winters International's offices, not that my family had ever noticed. Good morning, Ms. Winters, my assistant Michael greeted me. The Winters International team arrived 10 minutes ago. Your brother seems impatient. I smiled, adjusting my custom-tailored Armani suit, an outfit my family would never see me wear. How many times has he mentioned being CEO? 7, and counting. He's also threatened to fire 3 of our receptionists. Perfect. I checked my reflection in the polished elevator doors. Gone was the carefully cultivated image of the unsuccessful sister. Today, I would finally be myself. Is everything ready? Michael nodded, handing me a leather portfolio. Contracts are prepared, security is in position, and the board members are all present. Also, he smirked, I had the photographer position themselves for the best angle of their faces when you walk in. The main conference room of Shadow Valley Partners was designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the massive oak table could seat 50. Currently, it held the entire Winters International board, their legal team, and of course, my family. I watched through the one-way glass as Marcus paced the room, checking his watch every 30 seconds. My father sat at one end of the table, attempting to maintain his dignified CEO emeritus pose but clearly annoyed. My mother was there too, probably invited to witness Marcus's moment of triumph. Where is this mysterious CEO? Marcus demanded, his voice carrying through the glass. Don't they know who I am? I'm the CEO of Winters International. 8 times now, Michael whispered. I took a deep breath. Let's not keep them waiting any longer. The double doors opened and I walked in. The reaction was immediate. Marcus froze mid-stride. My father's carefully maintained composure cracked. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, spilling across the mahogany table. Olivia, Marcus sputtered. What? What are you doing here? This is a private meeting. Security. I walked calmly to the head of the table. Security won't be coming, Marcus. They work for me. Everyone in this building works for me. What is this nonsense? My father demanded, standing up. We're here to meet with the CEO of Shadow Valley Partners about the Tech Solutions merger. You are meeting with the CEO, I replied, sitting down and opening my portfolio. I'm Anna Winters, founder and CEO of Shadow Valley Partners. Though most people know us through our various subsidiaries, like Tech Solutions, the silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face had gone from red to white to an interesting shade of gray. My mother was frantically looking between me and my father, waiting for someone to explain that this was all a joke. This is impossible, Marcus finally managed. You work out of that tiny office downtown. You're barely making ends meet. You're a carefully crafted image. I cut him off. That small office, it's one of hundreds of properties I own. While you were busy mocking my little investment company, I was building an empire. Shadow Valley Partners controls interests in over 200 companies worldwide, including, as of last year, a majority stake in Winters International. My father found his voice. You're lying. I would know if someone had acquired that many shares. I nodded to Michael, who began distributing folders. Shell companies, blind trusts, offshore accounts, all perfectly legal, just well hidden. You taught me the importance of controlling information, Dad. Remember? Or was that lesson only meant for Marcus? The board members were flipping through the documents, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock to something approaching fear. The numbers don't lie, and these numbers told a very clear story. Shadow Valley Partners, my company, owned 57% of Winters International. But the merger, Marcus stammered. Tech Solutions agreed to sell to us. Tech Solutions agreed to sell to Winters International. I corrected him because I ordered them to. I've owned Tech Solutions for 3 years. This entire merger was orchestrated by me. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. Why, Olivia? Why go to all this trouble? I leaned forward, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Because 15 years ago, you decided I wasn't worth investing in. You offered me a position as Marcus's assistant, claiming it was for my own good. You said I didn't have what it takes to succeed on my own. So I set out to prove you wrong. And now, my father asked quietly, now things are going to change. I pulled out the final contract. Marcus, you're right. This merger is going through, but not the way you planned. Tech Solutions will acquire Winters International, not the other way around. The company will be restructured under Shadow Valley Partners management. Marcus jumped up. You can't do this. I'm the CEO. A position that requires board approval, I reminded him. And since I control the majority of shares, I let the implication hang in the air. The next hour was a blur of signatures, legal requirements, and shocked silences. Marcus was removed as CEO to be replaced by someone of my choosing. My father would retain a position on the board, but without his previous executive powers. The company name would remain Winters International. I wasn't completely heartless. As the board members filed out, leaving just my family, Marcus slumped in his chair. All this time, You were playing us. No, Marcus, I was building something. Something bigger than you could imagine while you were busy taking credit for other people's work. I stood up, smoothing my suit. By the way, I still have that Mickey Mantle card. I bought it at auction last year for considerably more than you sold it for. My mother reached for my hand. Darling, surely we can work something out. We're family. I gently pulled away. Yes, we are. And that's why I'm not dismantling the company or firing everyone. But things will be different now. Success isn't just about wearing the right clothes or having the right title. It's about creating real value. Something I learned on my own, no thanks to any of you. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Marcus, about that coffee run. I take mine black, 2 sugars. You can bring it to my office tomorrow morning. The big one, top floor. The next few months transformed Winters International. Under Shadow Valley Partners' leadership, the company expanded into new markets, developed cutting-edge technologies, and doubled its market value. I appointed competent executives based on merit rather than family connections. Marcus eventually found a position at another firm, hopefully having learned the value of humility. My parents took longer to adjust to the new reality, but gradually our relationships began to heal. Not because of my success, but because they finally saw me, really saw me, for the first time. These days, when people ask about my path to success, I tell them the truth. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. And sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right. As for that small downtown office, I kept it as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. After all, success doesn't always wear a designer label. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, building an empire while no one's watching.